Well, hello, world, and welcome to another episode of the Crisis Victory Show. I'm Dr. Hal Bradley. I'm executive producer and host, and my co-producer, Pete Turner, is somewhere in the background. There he is. Hi, Pete. Pete also
Hey,
has
everybody.
he also has the Break It Down show, so it's a real honor to be able to get him to work with me on this program here with you all tonight. So thank you, Pete. And our guest tonight is Tom. Tom Mason has quite a story of recovery. He spent almost 2 decades or around 2 decades as a methamphetamine addict and user, recovered from that a number of years ago, got into counseling with other people, and becoming an example of what true crisis victory is about. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you. Tom, say hi to the audience.
Hello, how are you? It's good to be here.
It's good to have you on, brother. And I'm really glad to have this tonight. So we got a few little topics we can kind of bounce around a little bit with regardless to being a crisis victory survivor. And I'd like to go first into the methamphetamine journey, if you would. There's a lot of people that'll be watching this show that they themselves are struggling with addiction, or they have some family member or close friends that are in that current situation that you have so eloquently removed yourself from some time ago. So why don't we go ahead and start there, the beginning of that, your journey in that, and then I'd like to get into your medical concerns at this time also. But let's take the meth first.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
So I think as far as addiction goes, I believe I was born an addict because I had a lot of the predisposed behavioral traits, not feeling like I was enough, always trying to be more, being a people pleaser. I had all that stuff from as long as I can remember. And then also I had ADHD quite a bit, pretty bad. So as we did when we were younger, we found ourselves, quote unquote partying. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's kind of a strange thing is, for a while I didn't really like speed. I've always called speed or crank, whatever. I didn't really like it too much, and so as a lot of my friends in my group are doing it fairly often, I was not. And then, as they say, if you go to the barber shop enough, you're gonna get a haircut. And I pretty much started doing it also with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first bout was in 91 is when it started. And then by 95, I was pulling, 5 to 7 days stretches awake, doing all the stuff that meth users do.
Yeah.
Being
Yeah.
derelict to society, not working, just being living that horrific life.
Yeah. It's quite a journey, isn't it?
Yeah. Looking back on it, it's the road I traveled was it definitely changed my perspective on life, but I wouldn't recommend it. I think there's other ways to get a better perspective on life
Sure.
than to practically destroy yourself.
Well, I think that sometimes the greatest lessons we learn in life are the ones where we suffered the hardest and the most. That seems to be where in later years of life that wisdom is acquired. And then later we can take advantage of the mistakes we made in our younger years and benefit others by hopefully preventing them from going through the same path that we did, such as you have done yourself.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I guess we have a different perspective. I think out of my whole group of friends that were doing it, a few of them have passed away. 3 or 4 of us got out and we're doing okay in life. And then there's still other ones that are in their mid 50s, still living that life. And
that's a sadness.
yeah,
It is.
It is because you want to help, but you can't help until the person wants it. You can want somebody to get help all day, but until they're ready to do that, then it's just you got to be there for them when they're ready, I guess.
Well,
So,
I think you hit it right on the head there, where each person has an independent journey in their addiction. And what I've found in more than 20 years of counseling addicts is that until they hit that that point of recognition that they themselves have to be the catalyst that's going to cure it. You can't rely on a counselor. You can't rely on family intervention. You have to rely on an individual mindset where you hit a point where you just go, enough is enough. And at that point, people like ourselves that have been on that journey can come into play and start offering our advice. But I find with most addicts that until they're ready to cross into that threshold of sobriety, that they're just not really going to take any information with them in counseling sessions or family interventions or things to that nature. How long have you been clean now? You've been clean a while, haven't you?
It'll be October. I quit counting the years. It'll be October 3rd, 2012.
Well,
So
congratulations.
15. Yeah, I quit I put the dope. I do I still do not. I don't do drugs. I mean, me and my wife do wine tasting, but I don't.
Yeah, sure, of course.
I don't. It's not really. We go. My wife's a wine specialist, so.
Well, you live in Northern California, brother. Of course, you drink wine.
No, but, I've kind of found out that the sober mind or the straight, clean mind is where I'm most comfortable.
Yes,
and
of course.
There's the benefits of drinking. Definitely, the effects don't outweigh the aftermath that you have to deal with.
Yes. So, yes, I understand completely.
Yeah.
I was an addict. I was an international smuggler for a number of years in the 70s and 80s, and was a high-level trafficker in the 80s and early 90s. And I remember one of the things that got me to quit doing cocaine, and we were doing excessive amounts of cocaine in those years, was I was taken to a ranch outside of La Tuna, Mexico in the state of Sinaloa, and I watched 3 Rottweilers eat a man alive in a corral, and they had me and my buddy down there. At that time, we were rolling millions and millions of dollars worth of cocaine money, funneling it into the Sinaloa cartel. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I thought we were going down there to negotiate a few hundred extra kilos, put on the loads. And the whole purpose was we were dripping in diamonds and gold and buying new cars and buying new real estate and really out there spending lots and lots of money and no way to show where the money was coming from. And the reason they executed that guy was because he was doing the same thing only down there. And they explained to us that this was drawing attention to their organization. Yeah. So the next time you come down here, if you're still doing this, then you can expect to be in that corral where he is. And that's how radicalized the lessons of obedience, if you will, working in a drug cartel became. Life was very, very real in those years. And I tell you, I have not done cocaine in well over 30 years. I haven't done any drugs except I smoke medical marijuana. The VA gets it for me because I was captured and tortured on foreign soil in the service of my country. I live with the jungle still in my head all these years later. And marijuana does help with the PTSD meds, but only at night when I go to bed. I never smoke pot recreationally. I'm not into any of that, and haven't been, like I just said, for over 30 years. Yeah. So when you tell me you've been clean 12 years, especially methamphetamine addiction, folks, those of you out there that have never been a methamphetamine user, let me tell you that particular drug, that is the devil's milk right there, because I tell you, once you get into that path, they just get so caught up in that lifestyle that they go days and days without sleeping, and boy, they get all zoned out. And I mean, they're freaking zombies. Yeah. And so, and to be able to break away from that is one thing, but to stay away from that for 12 years, man, Tom, my hat's really off to you, brother. Kudos to you. And I hope to God you're out there in a counseling ability now, if you will, and talking to other people about this addiction, because you've lived it, you've walked it.
Right. We'll get to my health stuff is what took me out of the counseling.
Yes.
I was going into the Solano State Prison, Vacaville.
I was in Solano.
Yeah. So I was with level 2.
I was in Greenside over in Vacaville, and they just opened Solano. This is 1986.
Okay.
And so they filled the yard with a bunch of us that were on Greenside transferring, going to NRC. Well, NRC was Vacaville, so you know about that too, huh, brother?
Yeah.
I ended up in Folsom, but
no, did you? So, through NA. Can I say that here? I don't know.
You can say anything you want, brother.
So through NA, I got involved with H&I, and I wanted to go into the Fairfield County Jail because that's where I'd been. You know, I wanted to return there and I wanted to walk out. So I kind of got my marching orders. Like, hey, do you want to go to the state prison and facilitate a meeting for lifers in there that are get lifers with the possibility of parole
Wow,
and help. And so I was like, sure. And
interesting program.
yeah, it was cool. I was a little weird at first because you're in the room. I was in a room with about 20 guys, all of them in there for murder. Maybe a couple weren't. And we'd have group and sometimes they would open up about their stuff. In fact, one of the guys was he was a cartel hitman, and he got caught coming over the border and doing hits and going back. And they got him, and he got released and he got deported. He did 21 years. And it was I got to be pretty close to those guys as you could,
Yeah,
they
sure,
accepted
of
me.
course.
They accepted me in there. Then when I got sick, which we'll talk about, I had to step out. Um, but the whole meth thing is when we talk about that lifestyle, one thing that it leaves an imprint on me. And I've heard other people too. There's
Yeah.
still something in me. Not that I don't want to go use at all. But like when if I'm driving through Vallejo in an area where I used to hang out at, I can still grab into those feelings how I felt.
Those are
You know,
triggers.
yeah. Trigger,
Yeah.
not triggers where I want to go do it, but I can always reach back and feel those emotions how I
Well,
was
what I
then.
meant, I'll stop you right there. Pete and I
Okay.
are both PTSD patients.
Hmm.
So certain sounds, certain environments, those are triggers to us, and they
Yeah.
can bring back traumatic memory circumstances. We've actually had an open discussion about that on the show. So that's what I was implying when I said it was a trigger,
Okay.
not a trigger of usage, but a trigger of negative reflection, negative memory,
Yeah.
that type of thing that can come about relapse. It can bring about other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Um,
thank you for letting me clarify that
no,
because
it's all good. No,
because
it's all good.
triggers usually trigger in NA meetings and stuff. And they talk about triggers. That means something that's going to make you go use drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
in that context. Yeah, it is.
yeah.
But it's I got to tell you though, with what the landscape is now, from what I've heard, it's totally different. In the
Really.
back when they got with the fentanyl now, sorry, with the fentanyl that's into things now, into everything,
Yes.
it's killing people now. And
Yeah.
back when I was using, I mean, you could die from meth, I guess, if you did a whole bunch. I don't really know. I mean, or it's sometimes it eventually would kill you. But I know a few people from town, and I think Pete even knows them too, that they lost their kids who were just partying,
Yeah.
doing coke or whatever, and had the fentanyl in it.
Yeah.
And
I've lost people myself from it. You're exactly right.
it's
It's
a whole different thing. And one thing I remember is back when I was using the dealer that I had. I'm just speaking on how the whole thing has changed now.
sure.
The dealer that I had, he also sold heroin, and to him, you didn't want people dying off your stuff.
Yes.
And now when people die off stuff, now that person has what I guess is supposed to be, that's where the people flock to.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's
Well,
just like,
the reason they put fentanyl in it is because it's a highly addictive drug,
yeah.
and methamphetamine is not really a biological addictive drug. It's a psychological addictive drug.
Hmm.
But now that they cut it with fentanyl, then what happens is the craving becomes enhanced for the need of having more methamphetamine in their bodies, and as a result, we see deaths occurring from methamphetamine use.
Yeah.
These are really dangerous times, and it reminds me of a statement that was made in the 1950s by Chairman Mao Zedong from China, and he said, "We will take over the United States of America without firing a single shot through the decadence of the youth." And look at where we're
Here
at
we are.
today. Look at the youth today.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but there's almost a majority of youth that are conflicted, uh, caught up in that lifestyle. I'm in my 21st year of working in the homeless environment here in the Pacific Northwest. I go into trap houses, and I'm sitting there at the table watching three kids, and I'm talking kids sharing the same needle. I'm watching young girls going in a back bedroom trading their flesh for a
Uh,
$20 fix. And I've been doing this for decades. And about 2 years ago, in all honesty, to you, to my audience, to everybody, I started pulling away from working in the trap houses because it just became too hard to continually look at that and not try to be a factor of involvement with
yeah.
stopping them from that. My purpose
Wow.
of going there, I'm a seminarial postgrad with a doctorate in pastoral counseling.
Hmm.
My purpose of going there was to be there in the event that somebody wanted to open up and talk about their low self-esteem or the damage it's done to their life with their family or whatever. I tried to make myself available, and I carry Narcan kits and a small med pack with me whenever I'm in the trap houses, so I can do a temporary a fix if necessary to help somebody and try to coax them into going to hospitalization. But
Hmm.
they don't. I get rape victims brought to my house. I get people that are overdosed that are brought here where I use Narcan kits, and everybody in my area around here knows that I'm available 24/7 for those needs. But I tell you something, trap houses they're horrifying, and it really
Oh yeah.
does they wear down on the caregiver after so many years of doing it. But you know
Sure.
what?
That's brutal to
It
see that.
is. It is, brother. And not only that, but there's becoming more of them.
Yeah.
It's not lessening, it's worsening. And I just had somebody leave here not 30 minutes ago that's in a homeless situation, a drug addict, came by to see me, but it's a person that I've known for almost 20 years in my environment that's still struggling with usage. And this person, brother, is your age. This is a
Yeah.
person in their 50s, and they just can't seem to shake it. But they know they can come to pastor's house and have a meal, sit down, talk about what they're going through. The only thing that I require is don't carry drugs on you and my property, and don't come over here high, unless it's an overdose case being brought to me, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
You got to set boundaries, brother, and you got to
Yeah.
stick to them. And you work as a counselor now with people. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If you don't set those boundaries, they'll run right over you, and you got to be
And
real.
you
Yeah,
know, addicts are like the best manipulators.
yeah, yeah,
And so when you say they'll run over you,
yeah,
if you
yeah,
if you give a using addict or even an addict who hasn't worked on himself, if you
yeah.
give them an inch and they can find some way to benefit through manipulation, they'll do it for sure.
Well, Tom, I don't know about your work that you do with the people, but I can tell you in retrospect to the way I approach that is if they keep coming back and they're not improving themselves, then I am not being the benefit or the service that they need.
Hmm.
So I start at some point start thinning out the herd, so to speak, because there's always somebody that does need this time over here to sit and talk to their pastor and be able to work through whatever issues are. And I see them genuinely trying to do that. And the other thing is they don't have nice environments like you. You live in obviously a comfortable home. So
Hmm.
does Pete. So do I. We're all kind of stabilized, and it kind of helps them to have a reconciliation to where they used to be in that environment, and how do we get back to that environment?
Yeah.
And this is the journey. So Christ told us to not just be doers of the words or to be hearers of the words, but to be doers only. Be the example. And you're a perfect example. You're a 12-year veteran of being clean. And
Yeah.
brother, you can sit there and you can show addicts that you see in your community through your own example that, there is an out at the end of that tunnel. Because boy, when you're caught up in drug use at that time, there's no end to nothing. It's just every day
Yeah.
you're out there seeking that high.
And your world's very small,
And your world is very small,
very
brother.
small world.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. That's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good
And
point.
you brought up the higher power thing,
Yes.
and you know that plays a big part in the whole thing. I was growing up a believer, and there were there were times I just the last towards the end of it, I had lost my wife who I'm married to. She found out because it was starting to get out of control with me,
Yes.
And she found out and threw me out.
Yes.
And she was like the most important thing to me. And besides my kids. And so the pain was starting to get to be pretty bad for me because I
Yes.
knew that the addiction was going to come from my kids. Well, through me, it was going to really affect my kids even more because through my actions, I
Yes.
had made my kids homeless. I had moved back to my parents' house and, totally changed their life. And that killed
Yes.
me to do that. And then I went on a little bit more. And through that time, before that had happened, we were about to get married. And I had prayed uh, to take this away from me because I didn't want to get married high.
I love that.
And
I
it
love that.
not only did it it didn't take it away the way I had imagined, but God works His ways that are most effective.
He
Yeah,
does indeed, doesn't he, brother?
yeah,
I
and
can look back 26 years ago when I was completed seminary and I was formally ordained. 3 years after that, I was installed with my own church. And for almost 4 years, I had my own congregation. I was up in the pulpit every Sunday. I was working the church arena. But at the same time, and you're going to love this, Tom, I was also a DOJ contractor and I'd be jumping off on missions. And almost all of my missions were outside of the United States.
hmm
So I'd be sitting there every Wednesday night. I'd prepare my sermons for Sunday service, and I'd get a call Thursday or Friday and say, "Hey, pack a bag. You're on your way to Bogota in the morning." This kind of stuff. And I lived 17 years undercover at the same time that I was a pastor. So after almost 4 years of having my own church, installed a senior pastor, I finally had to go to the bishop and request a sabbatical from that type of ministry because I was jumping off on cases a lot. And I couldn't sit down in a whorehouse in Costa Rica buying 500 kilos of cocaine and doing a major takedown, and 2 days later get up in the pulpit and preach the innocence of Christ. I couldn't do
yeah,
it. It
yeah.
became too so that
How did you
had
get in with? Sorry,
yeah.
it's in
Go
my
ahead.
mind. How did you get in with the Department of Justice?
I was in Leavenworth Federal Prison and got
Mhm.
called up to the warden's office one day, and a couple of suit and tie guys, State Department officials, said, "How'd you like to get out of prison? We'd like to put you to work as a contractor." You got to realize I spent 15 years of my life in the cartels in Mexico, international smuggler, and later a high-level distributor in the United States. And I mean, I've moved tons of coke.
Okay,
And what I did was I had gone to Culiacan, said, "Okay, I've made mine. 15 years in the game. I'm done. I'm either going to end up dead or in prison. Now I'm married and I have a couple of young small kids, and I
hmm
didn't want to raise them in that." And according to Snohomish County records, for the audience, by the way, it's verifiable, I had a fortune in real estate in the county that I live in. 47 rentals, multiple companies. I was set. So I went down there to negotiate, and it was all hugs and handshakes. And yeah, sure, no problem. And I got home to a third of a ton of cocaine and two soldiers sitting in my driveway waiting for me. So that was their signature. And at that point, I was an underboss. I had the power to turn the loads away, and I did. And the following day, I walked in the U.S. Attorney's office, and I said, "I'm Hal Bradley." And they said, "Oh my God, Hal Bradley just walked in." And I found out that I was the primary target of Operation Northern Exposure.
Oh,
91
so
to 9. Yeah,
so
I
they were
was it.
coming for you.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, but I had cops on bail. I had a lieutenant on the police force that kept me updated, and we had
Yeah,
him on payroll for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And yeah, I knew they were on to me, but that wasn't it. They weren't going to get to me because
yeah,
I had lieutenants that were moving the weight, and I had safe houses where it was stashed. I had buffers of protection, but
hmm
what I didn't have was an out. And when
yeah,
I went to Folsom Prison in California, I kept my mouth shut. I did my time, no problem. You do what you got to do. You made your
yeah.
problem. You don't take other people down for it.
hmm
But in this case, where I went down to Mexico and negotiated my term, ending my business with that particular cartel, and coming back to a third of a ton of cocaine, as they're saying, "Yeah, you're not going nowhere." It left me no choice. I made the decision that night. And the next day, like I said, I walked in and I was facing mandatory life, no for parole.
hmm
I already had kingpin status in their investigations. Conspired to, I think, 720 kilos of cocaine. I mean, I was done.
That's a lot.
And they get Hal walking in, and it just literally blew their minds. So they called
Yeah,
all these agencies together that afternoon. We sat down with my attorney and me, and they just said, Jesus Christ. I mean, this is the last thing we expected. How would you like to work off your life sentence? So we started from life all the way down to where ultimately, when I went in front of the judge 19 months later, I ended up with 8 years in federal prison. But when I was in there, I was about 4 years into it. I had left the medical center for federal prisoners. My liver was shutting down, so I spent 11 months on chemotherapy treatments, got cured. But during that time, brother, I ended my seminarial studies, did 2.5 years of seminary while in federal prison, was formally ordained. I did Assemblies of God practice. That's who I followed. And at the same time, I was trained as a certified hospice counselor for fellow prisoners and took 24 of my fellow prisoners through the dying process. And my seminary wasn't in an academy. It was in the death rooms of that medical center for federal prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. So when I didn't need to be on chemo no more, they transferred me up to Leavenworth. And I did about a year there when they came in and said, how'd you like to become a contractor for the Department of Justice? And they don't recruit rats or people like that, because those kind of people you can never, ever trust. I didn't get arrested and start telling on people. I took on a damn drug cartel. And I knew that if I was going to do that, that my death would be imminent. More so than worrying about death. I've seen countless executions. I've seen beheadings. I've seen people lit on fire. I've seen people taken out and shot right in front of me. I mean, I have been around that for decades.
They're nasty, aren't they?
They're beyond that. The Colombians taught the Mexican drug cartels the art of torturing for informational extraction or revenge. And of course, they were taught by the Central Intelligence Agency. They're interrogators who taught Central America and that area. But that goes all the way back to the 70s and 80s. But anyway, getting back to our story, that was my turning point in my life. And that was 31 or 32 years ago now. And I just fell on my knees in a prison cell. After 19 years, I got sentenced. I'm on my way to catch a Con Air flight back east, and dropped to my knees in a holding cell. And another prisoner came in, dropped to his knees and put a hand on my shoulder and started praying. And then another one came in on the other side of me and did the same thing. And I could just feel the chains broke the instant that I really believed, that instant when the truth was revealed. And I knew that Jesus Christ was real. No question about it, because cussing left me, anger left me, depression left me. There was nothing but an on-fire burning sensation to get to know this path. And it reminds me, brother, of Saul on the road to Damascus. And he got struck down and scales covered his eyes. And he was taken to the house of Ananias. And Ananias lifted off the scales, and he became converted from Saul to the Apostle Paul instantaneously. And wrote most of the books in the New Testament. But anyway, that's my journey. That's how I found my faith. I've been practicing my faith for 31, 32 years now. And it's stronger by the day. I mean, and I've got a PhD under my belt in it. I did 13 years of school to get that doctorate, which I completed in 2004. But
good stuff, though.
It's the best. It is. But also, I have the wisdom of living 15 years in the drug cartels. I have 17 years undercover for the Department of Justice. When I finally got out of it in 2018, I was 65 years old, and I couldn't take another day outside the wire doing that type of work. I was in Mexico, smuggled out of a very hot zone, going through 2 cartel checkpoints in the trunk of a car, loaded on a plane, hit Tijuana, walked across the border, met a team, got debriefed, as I always did whenever I enter stateside. And that following morning, I rescinded my contract because I was not a prisoner and I wasn't somebody working off his case. I was a contractor. Big difference.
Right.
Quit anytime you want.
Yeah.
So and then I've started writing novels. I've got 13 books out there that I've written now, and 11 of them are action adventure novels called the Harold Brandon series, Operation Codename The Fox. And I write about one man's war against the drug cartels. And that's exactly.
I want to read that.
Brother, they're amazing. They're just amazing.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of them.
That whole story, real quick. I was just in Mexico last April.
Oh,
and we're in a town called San Pancho. Do you know where that is?
What state?
You know Sonora? Sayulita, about an hour north of Puerto Vallarta.
Okay, I do know that. Yeah, I do know that area.
So,
yeah.
It's a little bit south of Calucan. a
Yeah,
little bit
in
south of there.
Kulikan. Yeah,
Kulikan, yeah.
yeah.
And a buddy of mine who was also a guy named Earl Miller, who was also in background like ours, but got out of prison, did well for himself in real estate. Anyways, we're at his place in San Pancho, and we're out at nighttime. It's a little village, and everyone's out having a good time, and there's no cops anywhere.
Uh-huh.
And I asked him, I said, you hear all this stuff about Mexico being dangerous, and I said, there's no cops here. Everyone's having a good time. There's nothing going on. He
It's
goes,
because
yeah,
the cartel's there.
the cartel's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, you're in Sinaloa, brother.
Yeah, he said people don't. There's a rule there that
Yeah.
you don't mess with the tourists at
Never.
all, and
Yeah.
you will. Oh, it's my dog. You will find yourself in a bad way, like maybe getting put in a pen of dogs to get eaten.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Given
it's
an
I just
acid
found that.
bath in a 55-gallon drum. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, they have big strict rules about that. Tourism is a big industry down there. It's
yeah,
politically motivated, and the politicians are what keep a lot of the high-ranking cartel members out of prisons and jails. Bottom line, so if
yeah.
they say don't mess with tourists, they mean don't mess with tourists. But
Yeah.
that's funny that you're not an internet, or were you I don't know if you were an international smuggler or not. I don't know.
No,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
international user.
yeah, yeah. Well said. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, I used to
yeah.
have I had a bar and restaurant on the beach in Mazatlan, Mexico. So
Okay.
you know where that's at. So
Yeah.
when you talk in Puerto Vallarta and Culiacan and all that area, that was my backyard, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever hear of Manzanillo or La Barra de Navidad?
I've been to Manzanillo before.
Yeah, isn't that a beautiful place?
So I went down there on a cruise, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And they replaced Manzanillo. They use that instead of Guadalajara.
yeah.
So you go to Puerto Vallarta, then you just go down a little bit south to the next day, and then we went to Colima.
Yeah, I love Colima.
Yeah, it was kind of cool.
Beautiful
I
there.
like that.
Yeah.
It was kind of it was kind of neat there. It was neat.
So you were also by Nayarit and all that then. Colima. Nayarit is a super small state. It's by Colima. Yeah, it's really I like that part of Mexico. I've been on every state in that whole country, brother, all over the place, working cases.
Yeah, I want to go to Osaka. Is that what it's called?
Oaxaca.
Oaxaca. I want to go there
Yeah.
because the food. I've heard the food's just dynamite there.
Yeah, and I've got photographs of mountains of marijuana back in the days when you had Kodak cameras before cell phones were around, back in the 70s. And we'd be going up there to grade pot that we were going to be driving north. And I would take my Kodak camera out the side window and click a couple pictures. And I've got them. If you ever want to see one, I'll show them to you. But it's funny. I'm talking mountains of marijuana in Oaxaca and Guerrero and that whole region down there. It was wide open back then.
Now it's a little bit different. Now, I mean, I guess it's
Tom.
I guess it's okay as long as there's a cartel in control. It's when they're fighting that things get a little bit sketchy.
Well, I'm surprised that just a year ago you were down there and it was comfortable because I know the cartels are at war. There's a lot going on right now, but you just happen to hit a really good province where there isn't any political activity for them to do any growth what they're doing is they're taking over like the avocado farms and the citric farms down there, and they're making the farmers pay like 30% of the harvest, and they're bankrupting farmers, and the cartels do that. They control everywhere where they're at. It's horrifying, but this new female Mexican president, I believe that she's going to make some waves, and looks like Donald Trump's kind of getting on them too up there on the old border, boy. I tell you, that's Pete and I did a story about that here a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, Pete? Yeah, we talked specifically about will Trump's war have an impact on him? My opinion, not really. Cartels know how to survive and they know how to evolve.
And then there's also there's another part of the conversation that's not being had. We're talking about them there, but there's still the demand here.
Oh yeah,
so,
exactly.
I mean, so that's my whole concern. If they want to go try to stop that, but now what's been allowed to happen is now they've created there's a monster here.
Yeah,
that
there
is
sadly.
And it would seem, and I don't have any experience with fentanyl myself, but from what I've seen of it, if they were just to take it away, just hypothetically, that would be I don't know if that'd be the best, thing for the addicts right now. Because if they were to, stop the flow of it, what would that do on this side for all the, what are the people going to do?
That's a good question, Tom. For one, we've got Suboxone now.
Yeah.
We didn't have that a decade ago. We do have it now, and
Yeah.
I know people that are on it daily that are breaking opioid habits and things like that.
Hmm.
And it does seem to be transitional. It does seem to be working. But boy, I know what you mean. The problem is up here. It isn't down there.
Yeah.
This is their main market for the whole planet is the
Hmm.
United States, and they sell all over the world. But
Yeah.
but but we're the target
Yeah.
client,
We,
so to
we, they
speak.
have a big audience here.
Yeah, we do, brother. Okay,
Yeah.
another part of this conversation I want to
Okay.
get into while we've got time is your medical situation as a result of years of methamphetamine use. I'd like you to share what you're struggling with to the audience, if you could.
Okay. Actually, it wasn't due to methamphetamine use, but we
Oh,
can get into what it was. In 2018, I got diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer,
okay.
and so I
Sorry to hear
fought.
that, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I fought that. I went into the chemo, radiation, and then in 2019, I got a letter from Phillips. I can say it now because the lawsuit's almost over
Sure.
with.
Sure.
My lung cancer, and I got COPD now too, and that was caused by a CPAP machine.
Interesting.
And so I got a recall notice for the CPAP machine that saying it's linked to lung cancer and a couple other things and COPD. So now I was like, because I was never really a cigarette smoker. I didn't smoke meth. I didn't really, I don't, I've never really been a weed smoker. So I was always a little bit like, wow, where'd this come from?
Yeah.
And then so I fought that. I went through the chemo. I did immunotherapy. I got an attorney and all that kind of stuff. And in 2020, August of 2023, I was doing my scans,
Yeah.
and it came back. And this
Jesus.
time, what happened was they had to remove my lung. And in October of 2023, they took my left lung out,
Yes.
and that was probably that was the most horrific experience I'd been through, without a doubt.
Yeah. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry. I'm very familiar, unfortunately, with 20 over 25 years of being a hospice counselor.
yeah,
I've seen countless cancer
mhm,
cases, and it's not only just having the lung removed, which, by the way, was very beneficial. It preserved your life, as you and
oh
I
yeah,
both
yeah,
know.
yes,
But the traumatic thought of that organ being taken out of the body and gone,
hmm,
that's a
yeah,
whole another department of how we deal with those type of scenarios. But you
and,
sound good, man, brother. You sound real good.
but there's a lot of I'm having to come to terms with today, and I use my faith a lot, but
Amen.
I've been going through over this whole thing. It's put me in a lot of anxiety, some depression, because
Yes.
my life is different now.
Yes.
Physically, I have limits now that I never had to think about, so I'm having to come to terms with that right now. Um, yeah, it's it's a one day at a time thing. I mean, I'm not going to go use over it at all, at all. But
Yeah, you're too strong now.
yeah,
You're too
I
strong.
just it's another battle I have to learn how to get around. Now I got to navigate through it.
Brother, you're
So
the ultimate crisis victory survivor. You are what you
thanks.
are. I'll share an understanding, if you will, to what you
Hmm.
just shared with me there. 5 years ago, in the night of June 6th, June 2nd, I got hit by a contract killer up here. They finally found me, hit me
Hmm.
in my backyard of my house, multiple stab wounds to the top of the head. They were trying to, puncture the base of the neck. In my military training, that was a way to take out an enemy with a knife if you came upon somebody, because it immobilizes the whole body instantaneously, and then you can do whatever you want. But the
Okay.
bottom line was, I knew that when he was bending my head forward, I knew the guy was trained, at least militarily, but he was also a martial arts expert. And he's taking this knife and he's trying to get that. And I kept putting my head back and I'm fighting him at the same time. And I'm 65 years old, brother. I'm an
Yeah.
old man. And
Nah.
this guy hold my head down. And he takes that thing, and I heard it pop, and my life was leaving me. I knew in that moment that I was going to be dead within seconds. My body relaxed. I remember a total peace coming over me, brother, and I
Hmm.
remember feeling loved. I was no longer connected to the world that we live in still, the material things. Everything left. None of it mattered. I just wanted to go. And
Hmm.
well, he felt it too. So he must have thought that he had delivered the death blow because when I came to, one of my tenants, I have a fiveplex, and one of my tenants had seen or heard the noise and saw me laying out there, runs out, he 911s it in. The paramedics and police all show up, and the paramedics took one look at my head, and I was in and out of consciousness at that time. My son's yelling, "My dad's dying! My dad's dying!" And it was a really big thing. There were
Hmm.
chunks of my head laying out there on the pavement, and
Yeah.
yeah, the paramedics said, "We got to get him stat. We got to get him stat." And I have a photograph of the shirt, how many doctors and nurses that they worked on me that first night when I entered in there. And
Hmm.
then, brother, I remember coming out of the coma a day and a half later, and I noticed right away there's no security in the hospital room that I'm in. And I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, they're going to hit me here again because, I grew up in the cartels. I know what they do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I made a call to a brother of mine who helped me build the empire back in the 80s up here. And within minutes, he showed up with some guys. They got me out of there. And I remember as I was laying in the bed coming out of the coma and thinking about the guy that had just come to kill me. And all I was a name and an address on a piece of paper. And I've had those myself. I grew up in that business.
Right.
It's just part of our world. But what told me about my conversion in that instant was that I had nothing but love and compassion for him. There was no anger. There was no aggressive feeling of any kind, other than I knew that he was in a spot that he couldn't get out of doing what he had to do to survive. And I've been there. And I literally had love for the guy that had just
Mhm.
left me for dead. And
Yeah.
that, brother, that's how you know that your faith is so cemented. But the
Hmm.
experience after being a hospice counselor for decades and working with countless people passing away in my presence, now I know why so many of them looked up at me and they would smile in that last 2 to 3 minutes before cognition would release and they would die.
Hmm.
And they would say, God bless you, or thank you, or I love you. And now I understand. So I bring this up, Tom, because in your situation, you yourself must have that stronger faith feeling because you have looked at the eye of the potential of dying. You've looked at the
Yeah.
very real possibility. And you don't
Hmm.
sound depressed. You don't sound all feeling sorry for yourself. You sound like somebody that's going, wow, it's just part of the journey. But the
Yeah.
but Tom, the hardest part of it was giving up my Harley. Last year I had to sell I've had a Harley I've been riding for over 40 years.
Yeah.
And I started having, because of the wound to my head,
Yeah.
sometimes I fall over.
And
And
so the therapy. So real quick,
yeah,
about motorcycles. You know the
yeah,
therapeutic value of a motorcycle.
brother,
Once you
do
put
I
the hel-
ever.
once you put the helmet on
Yeah,
and you're going down the road,
yeah,
you have to think about what you're doing and nothing else.
yeah.
And that's one thing. I used to race motocross for a long time,
Oh wow. Well,
many
then
years.
yeah. I never
So
did that, but I've got 40 years riding hogs.
yeah, and but I've been on the street, and you get the same release
Yeah,
of
yeah,
all the BS that life can bring you when you're on the bike. And
absolutely.
I don't think that I could physically ride a bike anymore. And that's one of the things that is hard for me because,
That's what I'm talking about, brother. The things
yeah,
that we have to sacrifice when we readjust our life after going through something like you've gone through, something
yeah,
like I've gone through. I get
yeah,
that. Yeah, I know you're sad feeling, bro. I miss two wheels, man. I mean, it's
yeah,
horrible, but
yeah,
it is what it is. You
yeah. And
just
that's where
adjust.
I'm at. It is what it is. I
Yeah.
have to just, I have to change my approach to things. And, luckily I got my wife is, I'm pretty lucky. I got my wife's great. We got four kids between us and the two
Oh, it's
grandkids.
beautiful. Beautiful.
And m- you
Good
know,
for you.
yeah, yeah. I can't. In light of all that, right? I live a life that's second to none, really.
I love that.
I
Yeah,
mean,
you do. I
yeah,
can hear it in your voice.
yeah. I don't. I just tell my wife, there's nothing else I can ask for, and there's nothing in my life that I feel that I need.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, brother, in 26 years of being a hospice counselor, I'm looking at
Mhm.
you, and I don't see no near death, nothing on you, brother. I
Oh
don't
no,
see it.
I'm
I,
still
I
I'm
don't.
still
Yeah,
in the curative phase
yeah, you're looking
of the
good.
treatment. Yeah, they
Yeah,
haven't told me to pack it in yet. So
yeah.
I'm still in the curative phase. But my choices were before I had the lung removed was either go on chemo
Yes,
and be terminal,
yes,
or get your last, have a chance to get through this and lose your lung. I
yeah,
was like, well, we're going to think about that. We're just, you know
yeah.
I, I think I don't want to die at
Well,
all.
tough choices are made. They're not made emotionally. When you're facing a choice like that, you make that based on the logistics of your physical situation. You
Yeah.
were totally aware of all options. Sounds like you've had pretty good doctors.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, you sound confident in that regard. Usually people are complaining about their doctors by now in this kind of conversation.
No.
You're not there.
Mm-mm.
So the bottom line is you made the right choice, and here you are, and you're going to probably be around for years for your family, and that's what they need. That's what you need.
To hope
And
for. Thank
and
you.
hopefully some of those addicts out there will get the benefit of your counsel, your
Hmm.
wisdom, your survivorship. And are you in any programs working with people right now? What's your status?
I have not been. And when I got sick is when I left the prison.
Right.
That's when I had to stop. I couldn't go back. And so actually, a little. I don't know how much time I have. Real quick, back to the prison thing. I
Yeah.
left for a while, and I did my chemo, and I got back healthy enough to go back in. And when I went in there, the guys, some of them started crying. Some of the
Yeah.
prisoners, because someone had told them that I had died. Because
Wow.
we got pretty close. In fact, the last day before I left, I kind of went back on some old behaviors. They made me a card.
Wow.
The prisoners signed this card, and I had to sneak it out. I, um,
I get that, brother. I
yeah,
get it.
yeah. I still have that card.
Yeah.
I don't think I have any other cards that people gave me when I was
Yeah.
sick, but I have that card from the prisoners that they made because in prison,
Yeah.
you, things come from the ground up.
Yeah, they
And
do, don't they?
yeah, and so when I came back for a while, it was really cool. These guys, those guys in that prison, they wouldn't have let anything happen to me. If
Was
something would
that?
have went down in that prison,
Oh yeah,
they
they had
they
they
would
had your
have.
back.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and I would like to go back into that again.
Which prison were you in, and where'd you go, Solano?
Solano, Vacaville, the one right next to the
Yeah,
medical
yeah,
facility.
yeah,
Yeah,
right next to Vacaville. Yeah, I know where
yeah,
it's at, brother.
yeah,
You know what I always thought when I first hit that housing over there in Solano was how it reminded me of a beehive. You know how you come into each of the buildings and you go upstairs on the ladders, and then you got the big bay area in the center of the building where everybody sits. And I
yeah.
mean, I could not believe that construction because I was used to being slammed in single cells and two-man cell type
Hmm.
environment, and
Yeah.
that wasn't Solano at all. It was pretty crazy.
What, were you in level 2?
I'm not sure. We were in Greenside, and what they did, I was only in Solano for 2 weeks before I shipped out. We
Okay.
were still in the Northern Reception Center (NRC), but they
Yeah.
had overloading there on Greenside, and Solano had just opened. We were the first
Hmm.
very to walk on the yard,
Yeah.
and so whatever dorm living or whatever type of cell living you were at, I don't know. I only know that we had a large yard, and we had these quadrants around the yard, and as you
Hmm.
walked into your quad, it had an open seating area, and then it had cells on the ground level, and then you go upstairs, cells on the second level only. But it was
Yeah.
all wide open. Does that sound familiar to you? Were you in one of those? Or
I was in the education area
oh, okay.
where they have classrooms,
Yeah,
but I do know that the guys that were in my group, um,
yeah,
they didn't live in. They called it living in cages. They didn't live in cages anymore. They lived in dorm living,
yeah.
and
Interesting.
and a lot of those guys, they spent a lot of time and they should living in cages, but
Well, in
in the
Folsom,
small cells.
yeah, in Folsom, I lived in Old Folsom. We were in cells,
Yeah. And
two
so
man cells, and
when they got the privilege of getting out because of, good behavior,
yeah,
they didn't want to do nothing to
to,
jeopardize having to go back.
yeah, to lose
I mean,
that status, yeah,
yeah, yeah, unless things went down and, prison still is prison. I mean,
yeah, do what you got to do. period.
Yeah,
I
and
get it.
I think that the guys in the group that I had and the recovery group, I think they were housed together because they would talk about you know how the racial politics are in
Oh
prison.
yeah, of course.
Um, they would talk about in their yard. They would talk to each other. The guy, people of different races. So I think that maybe they were housed together also, and those racial politics were put aside.
Wow,
Maybe.
that's very different.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't ask the questions. You know that's one thing I learned there is, you know, if they're going
yeah.
to tell you something, you let them tell you.
Well,
You
we
know.
had separate TV rooms, for whites, blacks,
Hmm.
Mexicans. We had the same thing in living. They didn't put a black man and a white man together in a cell. When I'm a D
Yeah.
number, D64038. I'm an
Hmm.
old number, brother, back in the
Yeah.
80s. So, do you still remember your number?
I was in Solano County Jail, and my number was it had the last four of my social and
That's
some
nice
other
that you don't
numbers.
remember it. Good for you.
Nah, I didn't.
Folsom
When I
Prison. Yeah, I'd never even been in jail in my life, and I end up, in the 80s in Folsom Prison in a hard joint, and
that's yeah.
Mexican mafia ties, the whole thing, what put me there. But
So
yeah,
do you still worry about the cartel still?
no, I wasn't even worried about it then. I'll never ever worry about it. I made my
Okay.
choices a long time ago. I never expected to be alive this long. Once I decided to take them on and go after them, you got to realize something, brother. I took on with the Department of Justice. And
Hmm.
that's another thing. The people that I worked with, they weren't drug users. These are people moving tons of
Hmm.
drugs. They're high level.
Yeah.
And I've got photographs of me with Chapo Guzman when we were kids. I lived
Hmm.
down in Mexico in 69, 70. I was in a mining camp down there. And when I met Chapo, he was 26. I was 28. We were both smuggling weed out of Jalisco State at the time. That's
Hmm.
before he went back to Sinaloa. He was from La Tuna, but he
Hmm.
was working for Angel Gallardo, Felix Gallardo, the El Padrino, the boss of all bosses.
Hmm.
And I knew him. I met him a few times. And Rafael Caracantero, he was the marijuana grower that we were all tied into. And this is a big ranch outside of the city of Guadalajara in Jalisco State.
Okay.
But I've got photographs of me with all those guys. It's so funny here, 42 years later. But when it became known that I was taking people out, I had $100,000 mark put on my head down there, and it's a capture alive,
Uh huh.
not a capture and kill, because they wanted
Yeah.
to kill me themselves. And a San Diego sheriff told me that I was working dope cases in Tijuana and Rosarita at the time. I came back stateside, and he said, "Well, we had an alert. There's $100,000 bounty on your head down in Mexico. Be fucking careful." But don't live your life in fear of anything. If you make choices, live by the choices you make and
Yeah.
be observant. I'm also a Washington State licensed private investigator. I had my own agency. Compliments of the Department of Justice when I finally decided to get out of being operator down outside of the United States. They arranged it, and here I am with two major felony convictions, and I end up with a badge in my wallet. And I was also a patch holder at that time in the red and gold family, and I left in the Banditos Nation. I was an amigo, one of those, and
Hmm.
I left the club with good standing because they said, "Well, look, brother, we love you, but we can't have a guy at the badge in his wallet,"
Yeah.
But they all knew that I was honorable. They all
Yeah.
trusted me. They all knew I wasn't
Yeah.
spying on them. The government never asked me to look at them. I
Yeah.
would have never done such a thing. They were my brothers.
Yeah.
But I left in good standing, which means that to this day they can come by and visit me, and I can see them. And nobody took my bike, and nobody tried to bury me in a hole out in the desert or any of that
Right.
bullshit. It
Yeah.
was all good. I left with honor.
Yeah.
But
Right on.
I'm glad I rode for years and had a patch on my back, and I loved the lifestyle.
Hmm.
I was a chaplain of my chapter, and I just thoroughly. I had the private investigation agency at the same time, so I could also do background checks on people coming into the club, stuff like that,
Hmm.
and hopefully save lives. Yeah,
Right
that's
on.
a
That's
pretty
cool.
yeah, it was a pretty insane life, but I'm glad I went through it. But
Sure.
anyway, getting back to your story, we're getting close to wrapping up here, and I want
Hmm.
to talk to you a little bit about maybe considering the possibility of going back and doing your prison work because you have a hell of a story. and you also have the confidence of inmates because you've been there and done that.
Mm-hmm.
And when we've done time and we're able to go in those environments, and I've done some of that myself, it's amazing how bonded they become with us because we understand.
Yeah.
We know what it's like to be away from your wife and kids. We know what it's like to not have the freedoms to be able to have movement and to do the things that you used to take for granted. So you're a wonderful, beautiful example for them, Tom.
Thank you.
And I get that. No, thank you for doing that,
Yeah.
man.
I'll get back
Um,
to it. I got to.
you're
I'm still
still
doing treatments.
yeah. I was just going to ask you that. You're
Yeah.
still in recovery process physically.
Yeah.
You look good.
Thank
You
you.
look. Yeah, you look good. I'm not kidding you. Unless you would have told me, I would not have guessed it. And I'm trained to spot it.
If Pete can show you some pictures of me not that long ago, last last year this time, I was going through chemo, and
Wow.
I
Wow. I can't tell.
nah,
Yeah.
my hair's
Good for
coming
you,
back.
brother. Yeah. 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 Don't get a haircut, bro.
No, I'm growing it long. I'm growing it long
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm ready to wrap this up. This is a great
Cool.
conversation. Tom, I want to thank you. I want to say God bless you to
Thank
you
you.
and
God
your
bless you.
wife, your children, and your grandchildren. You're really solid. And Pete was right. He told me I'd enjoy you, and I thoroughly have. I have
Right on.
nothing but
Cool.
respect for you, brother.
Same here. Likewise.
Yeah.
Very much.
Thank you from
And
the
hope to
bottom
see
of
you.
my heart.
Right
Yeah.
on,
Well, I'll get down there and we'll get a chance to see each other. I have my lifelong friend is very close to you. So
Okay.
I'll make arrangements with Pete and let him know in advance if I'm going to be down there. I am going to be in Monterey in April. I'm going to be speaking at a rehabilitation center. It's a state of the art, 300 people there, and they stay there a minimum year, up to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be guest speaking down there. So I'll be flying into San Francisco, but staying in San Jose. So I'm
Okay.
pretty close to you. So
Yeah.
we'll talk about it at that time.
Okay.
Anyway,
Pete can pass you my number, and you have my email, and let's keep in touch.
we will, brother. God
All right,
bless
bro.
you again, and get back in there and help those prisoners. That's okay, folks. Well, that wraps up another episode today, and I'd like to take this moment to thank each and every one of you for taking your time to catch our show. Now, if you like these shows, I would ask that you would please hit like, share, and subscribe. It's so important to us that we get these messages out, and we understand that these are graphic, almost toxic interviews. But this is the kind of impact that we feel is needed in order to make sure that people understand the significance of the problems that we are confronted within our own country and around the globe. So I'm going to say at this time that I love you all. God bless you all. Hasta luego, y vaya con Dios, and go Victor.